showing up for
Sure.
moral support.
Sure.
And
where's everybody else?
Leah, Richard Harris, Dave Denkier.
They're still.
We're prepping.
Okay.
And then we had a couple more people on our meeting on the way, so we'll probably hold up for a little bit.
Okay, because it's supposed to be over there and then it's over here and so on.
Exactly.
All right, cool. I'll just sit down and
Thank you, Robert. Good to see you.
make myself at home.
Good to see you.
Peter asked me to take pictures, but I don't have a camera or a phone.
I'll give you my phone here.
No, I don't want it. Okay. I don't need it. Are we gonna be late for you? You're gonna be okay? Okay, good.
Howdy.
Hello, buddy.
Good to see you again.
What do you? Oh, you're just getting things all set right.
It's live streaming.
Live streaming. Oh, wow. Last time I saw you was at the thing down at Portland State.
That's right.
And I never forget that guy across the hallway when you said, I forget what you said a lot, and that guy across the hallway, you said, I needed our, I forget what you said, he goes, well, just don't smoke it then. Remember that?
You don't have to smoke that.
Well, he said, just don't smoke it.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm going, okay, I guess maybe we'd be okay with vaping or eating. I see water, I'm gonna have some.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this was kind of a last minute deal, but whatever. I was able to make it, so here I am. I'm gonna go wander around until we get things rolling. I haven't been here
All right.
long. I'm just, oh, good, we got three.
Hey, good to see you.
Okay, I'll wait. I've never been here before.
So we'll get started in like 3 to 4 minutes, all right?
So yeah, you wanna just grab a chair here? Just careful with our cords. You wanna have a chair? You have your phone. Okay.
Squeeze this over here for a little bit more room, if that's okay. I'm good. Just wanted to give you guys a little bit more. And Russ will scoot to the side. Now I can see.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. Radical Russ here at the ACLU of Oregon in downtown Portland, where we're about to begin the press conference for New Approach Oregon, announcing their campaign of Let's Finish the Job. There are many entities in the state that are trying to change, alter, or amend, or even abolish some of the key provisions of our Measure 91, our voter initiative to legalize marijuana that passed with the largest measure of support of any voter initiative to legalize marijuana. In fact, Measure 91 passed with more support than California, Oregon, and Colorado passed medical marijuana. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll get started here in about 2 or 3 minutes. They're still getting all the media and the speakers ready. We had a quick change of venue, so people are getting relocated. Let's go on inside. We'll just get ready to wait here, and we'll see what happens.
kind of set up what we think goes away.
Okay, I think they're coming in.
Go over here.
I'll go all the way.
All right, ready to, it's your show. Ready to roll?
I'm gonna watch. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you. How you doing? Yeah, Barry's still working on his hands.
We need more chairs in here, because we have more chairs to bring in. Would that be helpful? There's just, well, do you want us in order of how we will speak to
Yeah,
the guy?
I'll figure this out.
Okay. Should we get some more chairs in?
Sure.
I think we're good.
Russ, nice to see you.
And Peter?
Thanks.
He lives in Colorado now. Yeah. He moved there. One of his sons died in a sudden and tragic accident, so he decided to move to Colorado to be with his family and a new granddaughter.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And the speakers welcome to stand up if they want to. Obviously, just the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, everybody, and particularly the ACLU for hosting us. My name is Anthony Johnson, Chief Petitioner, one of the co-authors of Measure 91 to regulate, legalize, and tax marijuana here in Oregon. As great as the victory was to bring a new approach and sensible approach to marijuana to Oregon, now really a lot of the real work begins, and that's to implement the will of the voters and to protect and improve our marijuana laws as we move forward. Here with joining me today are various members of our coalition to help bring this victory to Oregon and this new approach to marijuana. To my right is Richard Harris, former Director of Addictions and Mental Health Services for the state of Oregon, who has dedicated his life and work to people battling addiction issues. Leah Maurer, our founder of Mothers and Moms for Measure 91, wants to address the concerns about making sure we keep marijuana in the hands of children and do the job effectively. And of course, Dave Fedenke, Executive Director of the ACLU, who has a long history of working to protect and improve civil liberties in the state of Oregon. And so first up on our docket here is Leah Maurer.
Hi, I'm Leah Maurer, Leahmaurer. I'm a founding member of the Moms for Yes on Measure 91 group. This is a group of parents who have stepped forward and said, yes, I support a better approach to marijuana. It was a completely organically grown group. All people came, and we are still getting people who asked to join today. We've grown to over 1,100 members. I'm also a mother of 3. And one of the main reasons that I voted yes on Measure 91 is because the safety of my children is a top priority. I believe that an approach to marijuana in a regulated market is much better than leaving it in the hands of a criminal market. I believe that it needs to be regulated. I believe it's a better way to control it. I brought my kids with me today. I have 3. They're 9, 7, and 3. I am a stay-at-home mom, so the majority of my time is spent caring for them in one way or another. With my older kids, That looks much more like helping them with school projects, taking them to and from soccer practice, cheering them on at their games. When they're busy with their extracurriculars, I get a little extra time with my little one, and that time looks much more like playing with trucks on the floor, Play-Doh at the kitchen table, going to the park, things like that. So like I said, I believe that a better way to control marijuana is to regulate it rather than leave it in the hands of the criminal market. But I'm worried, I'm concerned as a parent that these last minute attempts to undermine and change the law that Oregonians so overwhelmingly voted yes for, I'm concerned about that. Changing such a well-written law is concerning to me as a parent. Because I've read Measure 91 very, very closely. It's a great law. It's extremely well-written. And as a mother, I have complete confidence that it will help us regulate and control marijuana. We need to get the basics right first. That's what we need to do. We need to focus on implementing the law in a way that reflects the will of the voters. I want to keep my children safe, just like all other parents want to keep their children safe. And that should be a top priority. And I'm confident that Measure 91 is the best path that we have for this as parents and Oregonians.
Thank you, Leah. Next up is Richard Harris.
Good morning. I'm Richard Harris. I was the former Director of Addictions and Mental Health for the state of Oregon. I retired 2 years ago, and prior to that I had spent 30-something years in the treatment of addiction and mental illness in the private world. The reason I voted for Measure 91 and the reason I supported it from the beginning was that it was a very well-written and balanced piece of legislation that was crafted after the experiences both in Washington and Colorado with some of the things that didn't work there. And it's a statute that allows for control and regulation and for taxation of marijuana in a commercial way, which is a much better way to control the availability of marijuana to people in our community who are already using it. Right now, there is no regulation except illegal sanctions for its sale or its use, and it's been really ineffective. In fact, for the last 77 years where we've attempted to criminally prohibit the use of marijuana has not been a successful strategy at all. So this is a way to regulate, and regulation is a tried and true method in the public health model of managing the way alcohol or marijuana is used. In fact, it's been successful with alcohol to a great extent since prohibition was ended. So it's time voters approve this. It's well written, it's very thorough, and it is complex. And it wants to balance the price of marijuana so that it eliminates the criminal market, and that's why the taxation provisions in the measure are there. It also wants to distribute funds to local communities in such a way that they can use those funds to deal with the kinds of legal issues they have, but moreover, the treatment or prevention of kids using marijuana or for adult treatment. So what's really important about this is that we keep the balance in this measure. When people have made suggestions now about what changes need to be done, even before we've implemented this, it's a little scary because, in fact, the measure took all these things into consideration, the needs of local communities, the state, and individuals, and that we don't want to upset that. What we need to focus on now is implementing this. When I was Addictions and Mental Health Director, we changed administrative rules on a fairly regular basis. And let me tell you, it's a very involved and complicated process, and so the current implementation part of the Oregon OLCC and the Oregon Health Authority are started now to do all the things that are necessary to take public testimony to hearing, to make those changes in the administrative rules that will allow for the regulation of marijuana. So what we want to do is stick with that. What we don't want to do is go off onto some tangent that in fact start to tinker with this balance that's been put in place, in addition to the fact that it was certainly supported by the voters. So I think we should say, that's the voter rule here. We will have experiences with it, no matter how well a bill may be crafted. There will be some changes we want to make later on, and of course, we can do that at any time. So I would say, let's focus on the implementation. Let's make sure that we get the testing, the labeling, the packaging, the licensing, the auditing process, the inspection, the taxation in this bill done as described in the bill. So I think it's time to just get focused on this, and the legislature is prepared to move forward with a committee to make the implementation happen in a regular and organized fashion.
Thanks so much, Richard. Dave Fedenke, ACLU.
As Anthony said, I'm David Fedenke, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Oregon. Spelling on my last name, I'm happy to give you all afterwards. I was also one of the folks who had a hand in drafting Measure 91, and ACLU was one of the first organizations to endorse the measure. I have been around in Oregon for quite some time. I have worked for the ACLU for more than 33 years. I was also one of the drafters of the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act that was approved by voters back in 1998. The ACLU also believes that Measure 91 should be implemented in a way that is designed to eliminate the underground criminal market for marijuana. That is one of the key goals of this measure, and to reduce the harms associated with marijuana and to move away from the failed policies of prohibition. For the criminal market to be eliminated, we must have a uniform tax level statewide and uniform regulations for producers, distributors, and retail outlets for recreational marijuana. The ACLU is also committed to ensuring that as Measure 91 is implemented, no harm comes to the many medical marijuana patients who depend on having access to medical marijuana. We must maintain affordable access to the marijuana medicine for those patients with debilitating medical conditions. The ACLU of Oregon will work with anyone who shares these goals so that Oregon can be a model for other states that also want to deal with marijuana as a health issue rather than the failed system of prohibition and trying to push marijuana into our criminal justice system. That process has failed. We need to move on to a system that will help us manage marijuana as a society much better than the policies that have been in place for far too long.
Thank you, Dave. Anthony Johnson, Chief Petitioner, Measure 91, the co-authors of the measure. You know, the Measure 91 process was really more than 2 years to listen to concerned citizens, patient community, people in the industry, legislators, people in law enforcement, to craft a measure that would better prioritize our law enforcement resources, regulate marijuana like beer and wine, that lead to creation of jobs, generating revenue for essential state services, while also protecting the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. In many ways, we move into a new campaign that doesn't represent any interest. It really represents the moderate middle that voted overwhelmingly for Measure 91 with over 56% of the vote, more than 145,000 signatures, more than 50,000 fans on our Facebook page, more than 50,000 members on our email list, and we'll be sending out emails and updates as we move forward through this legislative session and the OLCC implementation process to really be the watchdog for the will of the voters and to ensure that we don't go off track unnecessarily. We really want the Oregon Legislature and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to really give what's called like strict scrutiny review to Measure 91. And before you go against the will of the voters and what the voters voted upon, let's have real facts and proof that those changes needed to be done. And there's a lot ahead for the state of Oregon, and advocates, proponents of Measure 91, we all want safe roads. We all want to keep marijuana out of the hands of kids. We want safe neighborhoods. We want to generate revenue for law enforcement, addiction and mental health services, and for our local communities. And so we have a lot at stake. We don't want voter backlash. We don't want interference from the federal government. So we want to work with the state. We want to tackle the basics first: the labeling, the licensing, the packaging, keeping marijuana in the hands of kids, giving the state the necessary tools to implement this rule, to implement the law effectively. And there are already attempts to go against the will of the voters, to change the taxation structure, to go against the will of the voters, to allow localities an easier way to opt out of Measure 91 retail outlets. And these actions that go against the will of the voters, overwhelmingly who support this measure across 14 counties with about 850,000 votes, those issues, those moves to go against the will of the voters will really exacerbate the underground market, the illicit market, and go against the priorities of the state of Oregon and what the voters intended. So we look forward to keeping our supporters updated and to really be a watchdog for the will of the voters. And thank you, everybody, for coming today, and we can open it up to questions if anybody has any questions for us.
Is it more than the taxing and the localities that you guys are against? You've alluded to a lot of things here, but there's not many specifics of what you are so alarmed about today.
So a few examples. Really what we can tackle are assigned measures before the Measure 91 committee currently. And those include outlawing any retail establishment within a mile from a school. You know, Measure 91 set out the reasonable limit of 1,000 feet from a school. A mile from a school will, will eliminate Measure 91 stores in many localities and really only encourage the underground market. Additionally, the Senate Bill 542, which would basically just white out, just take out all of the local control rules, regulations, opt-out procedures, and state taxation established in Measure 91, and once again will only exacerbate the underground illicit market that we're trying to get rid of, allowing localities to impose taxes up to 40% on marijuana will really go against the will of the voters. So those are some of the major issues. Now, there are bills introduced that will allow for more research, that will study this issue, that will potentially give the state the time it needs to address these issues. And those issues that don't go against the will of the voters, that will allow for a more effective policy, we'll certainly support those measures. But we want the will of the voters, the text of Measure 91, really implemented as closely as possible before drastic changes are made.
So Dave, you mentioned protecting medical patients, and is there an aspect you're specifically referring to there?
Well, there is a bill that's been introduced, although we understand from the chief sponsor of that bill that it's a placeholder and there will be major amendments to that proposal. But that would have completely moved the medical marijuana program out of the Oregon Health Authority and put it into the OLCC, and essentially combined the recreational and medical system. We're opposed to that. We believe that the health authority is the right agency to be dealing with patients with debilitating medical conditions, both to protect the privacy of their medical information and to understand the best ways to make marijuana available in the medical sphere. At the same time, we understand there will be, with medical marijuana dispensaries having come online recently, we understand that some of those retail outlets may also want to be involved in the recreational marijuana market as that gets up and running. We, we're open to talking to legislators and others about how those two systems could be meshed in a way that would be good for everyone. What we're adamantly opposed to is any changes to OMA that would hurt medical marijuana patients. And we take that responsibility very seriously. One of the key provisions of Measure 91 was not to make any changes to the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act. And that was very important to all of us who were involved in the drafting. We do not want to see patients, many of whom are low income, dealing with, they have to be dealing with debilitating medical conditions, but some of them are, a significant portion of that patient population is on fixed incomes, relies on family and other caregivers for their daily existence. And if they're pushed into the recreational marijuana market, number one, they're not going to be able to get access to the medicine they need because it's very different than what will be available in the recreation market, and they won't be able to afford it.
Dave, will the ACLU mount legal challenges to any major changes that are made to Measure 91 in the legislature?
This is a statute, so it can be changed by the legislature. We purposely wrote it as a statute rather than as a monster constitutional amendment that could only have been changed by a vote of the people. We expect that when it comes down to it, the legislature is going to respect the will of the voters. We're trying to work with the legislature. If there are problems that we missed in the drafting of Measure 91, we're as interested in fixing those as anyone would be. But we also know that the OLCC has a lot of work in front of it to be able to get the system up and running on time, and that it's not going to help them if the rules are changing midstream. So we're hoping the legislature will act on this swiftly, that they will leave Measure 91 intact, and if they need to make some tweaks around the edges, we expect to be involved in those discussions.
Dave, you mentioned things that might need to be improved, and Anthony, you mentioned how localities are pushing to get around a vote of the people, to be able to ban licensees on their own. One complaint raised by in some of these meetings I've heard from Eastern Oregon is even if you do allow for a vote of the people to ban licensees, that vote can't take place until 11 months after the licensing has taken place. Would you support some way of rectifying that situation to give localities a chance to vote to ban before the licenses are issued?
At this time, we'd have to look at the exact piece of legislation, but I think that the opt-out procedure of Measure 91 is likely sufficient. The licensing will start, taking place. The OLCC will start accepting licenses at the beginning of January of 2016. Then there'll be a process of them approving those actual licenses. And I don't think anyone expects any Measure 91 licensed and regulated stores up and operating until the latter half of 2016. And I think practically speaking, business owners will know if their locality is thinking of opting out and holding such an election, and that most people will think twice about opening up in a locality that there's a good chance they're going to opt out because, for instance, it could be a county that Measure 91 didn't carry. And so if they happen to get a license, that license will be good for a year, and then when that year is up, they won't be able to renew. So I think changing the will of the voters for something that is theoretical and even practically speaking will only allow a licensed store to be open for a few months are premature to go against the will of the voters at this time.
And I think it's important for you all to know that we patterned that provision in Measure 91 on the provisions in Oregon law dealing with alcohol. So it's currently permissible for a county to be entirely dry when it comes to alcohol, but they have to have a vote of the voters in order to do that. The reason we chose the general election is because that's when most voters participate in our elections. We didn't want these decisions being made by just a small minority of the residents in a county.
Leah, one of the other major concerns is parents that don't have a whole lot of understanding of the issue, their fear of marijuana edibles, particularly candies, gummies, lollipops, and such. How do you feel about that? There's a lot of push in the legislature to outright ban these kind of things or relegate them to a medical use only status. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel that the system that's currently in place, or, that was in place before Measure 91 passed, is that stuff was all over the place anyways. It was all over the streets being sold in the criminal market, so if kids wanted to get their hands on it, they probably could. Now that it is gonna be brought above ground and put in a regulated market, all the edibles will be regulated. They'll know where they are coming from, who they're going to, they'll be licensed, they'll be labeled, tested, all that stuff. So I think if parents look more closely at the issue, they will understand that it's gonna look much different now than it has before. I think under a regulated market that our children will be kept safe from. And I do think that, I understand that concern because you want your kids safe, and I feel that Measure 91 has outlined that very clearly and that they will be safe.
And the OLCC can impose childproof packaging
Yeah, absolutely.
regulations, and we certainly expect they will.
Absolutely.
So the parameters of this campaign, if I understand, are testimony in Salem as this stuff goes forward and sending emails out, anything else? Yeah, this right here.
Yeah, we may organize events. We'll definitely be testifying before both OLCC and the legislature, and ensuring that the will of the voters is implemented. We'll be, asking our email list and our supporters through surveys, what are their priorities and where do they, what do they care about? So, it'll be an ongoing process, and we will, right now, the concentration is really on the legislature and the OLCC process. The OLCC is currently on a listening tour, so we're helping our supporters know of those events and to show up and address their concerns. We already sent a notice to our email list about participating in the online survey that the OLCC put out, and I believe a few thousand of our supporters filled out that survey. They had about 16,000 to fill it out. So we will be doing really all that's necessary, and a lot will depend upon how the legislature reacts, how the OLCC process goes about, but we'll definitely be engaged and really do all that we can to protect the will of the voters. All right, unless there's any other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for being here, and ANTHONYGOHNSON.